Hey there, Rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you a feature match between myself on Brad-lua versus Tyler Tompkins and an updated Ki Lua Midrange. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, the Ruler School Circuit Series now offering our 2024 Quarter 1 circuit kits, and our guest lecturer members, Fight Ramen. Class is in session. So as we get into it here, just a reminder that Odyssey Games does have their pre-orders up for Pilgrim Memories Masterpiece 1 coming out at the end of January. You are not going to want to miss this set. It is going to be an absolute great set for both new players and returning players and current players. So it's just definitely a set that is the do not miss of anything enforceable for the past couple years. So we have here Tyler Tompkins is playing a Ki Lua Midrange using gas. It has lost the ability to burst out as aggressively because it no longer has Phantasmal Ascendant. You see he grabs his favorite little Frayless Devotee. That's just because he forgot to grab Return of Judgment, the extension rule, so he's just putting it out there. And I am playing Brad-lua. With the extension rule Return of Judgment, it is more of a control-focused shell, kind of where control Ki Lua kind of goes now without Megiddo, simply because of the fact of, like, we're really not actually a Ki Lua deck, we're a Brad deck. We just kind of start as Ki Lua to get advantage with some of her early game plays, and value generation that comes out of things like Grand Leon, as well as Ki Lua Fossil Girl to kind of keep our hand filled, and it's always nice to have Divine Lightning on back foot, not to contract, but to stop other contracts or spot remove abilities or things like that. So we'll see how this goes with, I believe Brad-lua is going to be on the play. Using Child of the Wind Moon is pretty helpful here in the mirror, simply because it does make the first Divine Lightnings kind of not do anything. At least it also helps against conflicts if those are being seen. But most likely we're just going to see a Callstone Pass from the Brad-lua deck. Unless it opens up Dinner Time, that's usually what happens. It would need Dinner Time plus the Brad and Ki Lua Resonator to really kind of make any meaningful turn one play. So most of the time it's probably just going to pass. We do see that Sword of Progress on the top for Tyler, opting to keep it with two other Swords of Progress in hand. In this matchup, we also have both decks with Shiva revealed, but only Ki Lua Midrange using the Rogue Spectator. Keep opting to not use that in the Brad-lua build. So we see the sort of progression to kind of get that online and pass the turn. Same thing from Tyler. Once again, Sword of Progress having another ability here because of like solarization stuff. So it's ways to be able to recycle it nicely. Which is really helpful, especially because the Brad-lua deck is using Liberation of Wind, so that's a really easy way to kind of just cycle those back and get some pretty good value out of it. We do see a Never End come down here on the top, as it's cycling a little bit. An interesting choice for Ki Lua, but it does kind of make sense. It wants these cheap bodies that can get very big, especially when supported with gas. And the idea to flood the graveyard with cards really quickly makes it so that Never End is pretty easy to activate here. Before recovery, we're going to go ahead and use Grand Leon to shoot the Never End. Ultimately, not expecting that to resolve, but it did. So I'm getting to cycle a card, going down to 3 ice counters, hitting another Moonshade. And one more pass here. Really want to leave up probably 2 will in this particular matchup before we start slamming the Brad and Ki Lua Resonator. No bite, no fight coming down here to try to draw 2 cards in the upkeep. We are going to try to fight over this probably. Anything to kind of cycle. There is a world where, though, Tyler has so many cards in hand at this point as well. I think Tyler still has 7, so this would be drawing him up to 9. There's a world where we just go, you know what? You're going to have to try to commit to a card this turn anyway, so we'll let the no bite, no fight resolve, and we'll fight over what you have to try to cast, or just let you pass the turn and discard 2 cards, thus kind of mitigating the value of no bite a little bit. So no bite when the opponent's hand is filled doesn't have nearly as much value, which is one of the reasons why there was a joke about using Last Days of a Powerless Dragonoid against Ki Lua control decks to make them burn all their ice counters in one turn where they didn't want them to be burned, and say like, hey, now you gotta discard a bunch of cards because you're over hand size. This is a similar situation as to why we're not taking any interaction. And as you can see, it's paying off here. We, just had a Call Stone pass, so we drew all those cards and we get to shuffle the hand a little bit, but ultimately we do have to just discard 2 cards again here, getting rid of a Fairer spell and a Muse Staring At. Muse Staring At's pretty good because it still has Remnant, so it's kind of a pseudo discard, but something to be said there. Finally seeing our first Stone of Knowledge, we're now up to Seal 4. Would have liked to have accelerated to a Seal 4 a little bit sooner, but we do feel comfortable now being able to play the Brad and Ki Lua here. Gonna come down. See a Sword of Progression, trying to cancel it. We're probably going to fight over this Brad and Ki Lua. We want this to resolve. It is our main value engine here. It's just a matter of exactly how we're going to fight over it. Probably seeing it looks like a conflict come down here. We could see this try to bait out the Child of the Wind Moon. I think that's the thought process here, is we have some stuff to be able to interact. So if we bait out the Child of the Wind Moon, it then means that our next Divine Lightning is like suddenly safe. See another sort of progression come down here. We're going to see that number 13 come into play. Like we said before, we're at Seal 4, so this only costs us 1. It is a Brad deck after all. And then we're seeing exactly how far this can go. If we got to hit this, it would send 2 of those sort of progressions to the graveyard as opposed to the RFG, which would be also very nice for preventing Tyler to be able to recycle them. And Brad and Ki Lua has resolved, so now next turn we're going to start being able to be aggressive because we can burn an ice counter before recovery to double the attack and defense and draw a card, and then go into just attack. We see that no bite, no fight come down. No bite, no fight here, coming down to try to replenish the hand. We are going to go ahead and let that resolve. See a Grand Leon off the top from that 4C stone. See, we did use Solaria's Wind. We are main decking that. We just decided, well, we didn't see it in opener, so it's not going to do much now, so we're going to go ahead and use it for conflict. Before recovery, we're going to pay 200 and use the Brad and Ki Lua effect here to try to remove an ice counter and draw a card, and then we drew for turn. Oh no, I think we did it to add a knowledge counter at the end of Tyler's turn, then draw for turn. Swing in for 9, seeing if we're going to get that damage. And in response to no blocks, we're going to try and do the Fossil Girl effect. We are going to see a Lorite come down there to stop burning it, but that's okay because at this point in time we did it after blocks, so we still get to do 900 damage, which feels nice. And we're at a point now where we have 2 RFG cards, so if we have a Liberation of Wind and now we have a target on Tyler's side of the field, we can set up the Brad play. Gonna see a Ki Lua Fossil Girl before recovery to try to draw 2. Very clearly seemingly to set up a gas turn is very likely here, but we're sitting pretty with 4 stones, a grip full of cards. We still have our Child of the Wind Moon. We still have Divine Lightning. A lot of options here. We're gonna go ahead and take the damage from the Grand Leon. Go down to 3,000. And if there's not a gas cast before recovery, then we're in a much better position because then it's like we're going to be fighting when Tyler does not have that much will, which would be very helpful. Or Tyler would have to be spending will from his turn to be able to do it. Does have the gas though, so this is going to be swinging in here, trying to pump up everybody +12/+12 swiftness, precision, and pierce. Having to fight about this during the recovery is not super great, but it is certainly something we can do. Thankfully, Tyler's board isn't very large, and at this point in time, to commit more creatures to board would require more game state actions, like would require more will. We're going to go ahead and use our filter here to do Sword of Progression, and see that I accidentally flipped that card off the top and stop the gas. We're not going to choose to bounce anything back to the hand right now because there's just really no point there. We don't want to give back a Lorite. More interaction is never good, and to give to your opponent. And because we stopped the gas, now we have to kind of if we want Gas to be good for the rest of the game, there has to be another one in hand right now, which means we get to fight over that. And that is then less likely to be able to produce a board. This is the biggest piece here. So Gas is coming down. And we're seeing if we want to fight over this or fight over trying to produce the additional bodies that are going to be required. So we're going to use a Mysteries of Grus Ballesta here. It gets us a knowledge counter on Ki Lua, teaching her a little bit more and forcing them to be a banish of the Resonator, which gets rid of the Lorite. Again, this is what I said. We're trying to fight over making it difficult to try to establish a new board. We do see Divine Lightning come down there. That's why we saved the Child of the Wind Moon to be able to stop the Divine Lightning, and also why we didn't give the Lorite back, because if we gave the Lorite back, then we could Lorite the Child of the Wind Moon God Art. Now we're still sitting on, if there's a second Divine Lightning, we're sitting on a our own Divine Lightning to be able to stop contracting, which is nice. We do see a no bite, no fight being used to produce a will. Down comes in Electra, Shooting Star of Fire. So in response to her enter effect, we're going to tuck our 2 swords back in to use Liberation of Wind, targeting our Brad and the Electra. You see I start to put the Solaria's Wind back, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. No, that's not what I want to do. I want to use these 2 swords and recycle them. Liberation of Wind is now unchaseable because we put 2 cards back. Now the Brad and Ki Lua gets to trigger, and we get to try to go replace into Brad, which is great because we've already burned the God's Art of the Child, so that's fine. And then we're still going to be attempting to be burned, but we're going to use the will coin from the Brad, swapping out to play the Lorite to cancel it. So setting ourselves up pretty nicely here. So, and now comes the tap out, except for a coin for Divine Lightning. We are going to then respond by trying to do Predator, our own Divine Lightning with Mastery to prevent Predator from being able to contract this turn. There is a world where, you know, we kind of played this in such a way where we knew that the Wind Moon Child is still an option. It definitely could come down to cancel it here, but we have 2 will still be able to interact. And that's the biggest piece. I think we're sitting on a Persephone in hand right now, which feels pretty solid. Definitely a world where we are going to make sure that this gas kind of just fully fizzles out. Interestingly enough, though, Tyler choosing not to use Child of the Wind Moon there. So that's just going to fizzle, and we get a clear board so that, you know, there's a world where you could just burn coin to flash in the Rogue Spectator here just to try to push in some damage and take a use of the gas so it wasn't completely invalidated. I mean, I'm probably not going to fight over that. It's going to be a total of 16 damage. We can block with the Lorite and make it down to 14, or we can just keep the Lorite and just accept that we're taking 16 and go down to 14. We're at a point now, though, where we're going to just start generating a big amount of value with the Brad. And there you go. There's the Rogue Spectator coming down here. And so that's going to swing in, and we're just going to take it. We're not even going to block. So we are down to 14 because of the 1600 with Rogue Spectator, and then pass. And so we're at a point now, though, because of Brad, we get to generate just a whole lot of value. Fossil Girl just to draw us 2. We also now get to play Brad and Ki Lua Resonators for just 1. We can do Callstone with Brad and then use Brad for Judgment. But the nice thing is here, Liberation of Wind can be removed from the graveyard to produce green for Judgment. And Brad only costs 1 to Judgment. So now we can flip over Brad and make use of Return of Judgment, which is really nice, which will get us a knowledge counter on the Brad, let us then kill the Rogue Spectator and draw a card. So we got to do that for free. There's also a world where you can just infinitely kind of cycle the Brad to kill himself with Return of Judgment to refill your hand, but we don't really need to do that right now. We're at good hand size wise, and we're playing a Brad and Ki Lua Resonator here to back us up, get us able to be a bit more knowledge counters. We could pretty quickly get up to Seal 10 if we need to, and ultimately just pass the turn. We're a lot safer now that all of the ice counters are gone. We do have to watch out for more Divine Lightnings for more Predators, but now the rest of the bodies in the deck aren't going to be as concerning. We also, interestingly enough, because we have ice counters, have a way to be able to just push lethal next turn, potentially. I'm going to be paying 3 to cast Shiva, not with Solarization. The reason why is because we want to be able to hit everything here. Actually, surprisingly, the Lorite survives if this comes down, because it only gets shot for 100 and it has 200 defense. But we do have the Persephone to put the Shiva back in hand, so we get to keep the board alive. Down comes the Never End here. And then we could see a tap out to replay the Shiva with Solarization. Paying 1. Making some extra will with no bite, no fight. This is a really good way to be able to replay that Shiva without having to worry about, with still being able to leave a will up. Replicant Shiva is going to come down here, trying to once again hit the board for its attack. We're going to see another sort of progression here come down, choosing again not to do the bounce mode. We're just going to keep our board alive. We do see the Pharaoh spell come down here. So we say, okay, that's a thing. We're going to use a knowledge counter and try to draw a card and see if we can draw it into some kind of answer with Brad and Ki Lua. Seeing if we can fight over this Pharaoh spell, or we just accept that it's going to resolve. We do have another Lorite in hand here. So all of these things get canceled, but we do have the Lorite to stop her enter effect. Now keep in mind, she does have swiftness and belligerence and precision, so she could attack into something, but Brad and Ki Lua is just bigger than her, so there's no real point there. At that point in time, we're just going to pass the turn. Now, interestingly enough, if we had saved the Lorite, we'd be in a pretty good spot here. We're going to go ahead and remove an ice counter and draw a card before recovery, go down to 1,000, so that we have this big 1,800 beater. If we had used this sort of progression and resolved it and bounced Lorite back to our hand, we'd actually be able to fight over this never-end activation trigger, but ultimately, we don't feel like it's super necessary at this point. Trying to figure out exactly what we're going to call stone with, or even if we do need to call stone. We are at 8, or seal 9. I'm gonna go ahead and call stone with Ki Lua, go up to seal 10. So this means that suddenly Mysteries of Gruus Ballesta is live to be able to sack the whole board. We're going to add a knowledge counter onto Brad and Brad to draw a card, because it is a good card on the top of the deck that we want to try to play around with. And the reason why is I believe we drew into a Girls Staring At, which is an excellent way to deal with a board of potential eternal blockers. Girls Staring At, just to kind of set the board out, gets to cycle us another card here, makes it so both Shiva and Neverend don't have a barrier or eternal or anything else like that. And then going to cast here. Now you'll notice I cast it with just regular casting cost. Technically that's incorrect because of the stat lines here. The safer way to do this would be to use Solarization to guarantee that we get to destroy both of them. Get the +1/+1 counters on everybody because of their cost, which at that point in time is enough for lethal with Brad and Ki Lua and Brad. And so from there we move into game 2. So Brad-lua being able to hold its own and stop the gas from really being effective there is huge. Worked out really well in the favor there. You can see how, even the gas builds without the things like Phantasmal Ascendant or whatever, they have to be more considerate of what engine they were playing or like how much they push in, because they don't have nearly as many bodies to be able to support it in the early game. We are starting with that free Solaria's Wind, because we have a wind ruler. This is mainly to help us kind of just cycle. You see we're taxing at the end of Tyler's turn to go into our turn, mainly just to remove the top card of our deck. We're going to go ahead and filter with Ki Lua Fossil Girl, going into a green to remove an ice counter and draw 2 cards. And then draw for turn, keeping our hand nice and filled. Like, tapping the Solaria's Wind to make the gas turn feel less effective will be helpful, but also just the idea of setting ourselves up for a liberation of wind if we don't have conflict to be able to start answering stuff is also just very nice. Seeing a sort of progression at the end of my turn into a Callstone Pass. Once again, we're going to go ahead and just tax at the end of Tyler's turn just to cycle to get another card. Now we're at Liberation Will as soon as we get it effective. We're going to go ahead and go to our turn and do Sword of Progression so that we can draw a card as well and set up future swords. Doing some cycling, whether or not I want to see that card. We do have a very good way to be able to draw it or RFG it. Ultimately, at this point, we're going to go ahead and pass. End of our turn, we're going to see a Fossil Girl in the city to try to pop the Solaria's Wind. We're going to go ahead and shoot the tax so that there's no additional setup that comes out of this turn. And then we start to think about maybe canceling something, but then we go, you know what? Solaria's Wind at this point in time has kind of done its job, getting us a few cards to set us up for Solarization, as well as a few cards to set us up for Liberations, so we're not as concerned about it. Now, a no bite, no fight's coming down here because there has not been a lot of card draw from the side of Tyler, and if we can make him fight over trying to draw cards, then no bite, no fight is even less effective. And if you can starve out the Ki Lua Gas list, it can be pretty tough for it to kind of come back. So we are going to fight about this conflict, recognizing full well that there is the availability of Child of the Wind Moon. We're going to see a reflexive conflict here, removing 2 cards to try to stop it. Down's going to come a Persephone to target our own conflict here. See, the first card we removed for conflict is a Dinner Time. Dinner Time is a great card, but if you don't have the Brad and Ki Lua Resonator, it's not very effective. And we're going to just then re-put that same conflict back onto the chase with a second Dinner Time to try to hit the no bite. Once again, choosing not to use Child of the Wind Moon there, maybe considering fighting over a Divine Lightning later or something else like that. But truly, getting to stop the no bite, no fight and burning 4 cards out of Tyler's hand there is pretty huge. Moving to recovery here. At this point in time, like I said before, we've got 4 stones. So without a Dinner Time, 4 stones is usually the ideal point when we start playing the Brad and Ki Lua Resonator, because it leaves us the ability to interact pretty heavily and set up for like a knowledge counter at the end of his turn and a Ki Lua counter on the beginning of our turn, or just the ability to fight a little bit over some interactions and then still toss a card or toss a ice counter at Brad and Ki Lua. Did see a Grand Leon before recovery. I have 3 cards left in hand at this point, so both decks kind of a little bit starved for resources at this point, though the Brad and Ki Lua Resonator is helpful to be able to replenish that on my side, whereas Tyler needs to resolve spells. Seeing a card probably coming in from the sideboard here, Metal Life Form Dragon, to tap down the Brad and Ki Lua Resonator and burn me for 600. That makes a whole lot of sense that this came in, especially because Brad and Ki Lua being able to double up to 2200, being able to double up to 1800 attack can close out games very, very quickly without even having to rely on anything else. And so keeping that one turn of not being able to be attacked by it makes a lot of sense. See a Ray Asnable come down here, which surprisingly would be pretty effective in the mirror because of the fact that it has barrier. Most of our spot removal is target removal, and because this just makes our Divine Lightnings, if we do go into Predator, not have any enter effect, so she doesn't do nearly as much. We start to think about putting a counter on, but then we decide to go to our turn first, and what we do here instead is we go Girl Staring at recovery to turn off the Ray Asnable, draw a card, and then move to recovery, call Stone with our Child of the Wind Moon, and then we're going to go ahead and put those 2 Dinner Times back, either the 2 Dinner Times or the 2 Grand Leons. I think it might be the Grand Leons to recycle. So we're going to go ahead and put back a sword and a Grand Leon to use Liberation of Winds, which is going to then kill our Brad and kill the Ray Asnable, who no longer has Barrier. This is going to help us then cycle into the Brad Ruler, getting that engine online. And like, oh, well, we don't have a lot of card value. That is okay. We are about to have a lot of card value thanks to Return of Judgment. We get a will coin rather than the knowledge counters, mainly because we're about to generate a whole bunch of knowledge counters without having to worry about needing those. So we're just going to take the will coin, use the will coin to play Dinner Time, and Dinner Time just says I can't play anything but Resonators for the rest of the turn. That's okay. I can use that will for Judgment. Judgment isn't playing a card, it's doing whatever I want. So this is where the engine comes into play here. We start to go for the Liberation will, but we go, you know what, let's use the will that's waiting for us here, that's already generated before we make more. Use one of it to perform Judgment. This will flip over. Brad will get a knowledge counter, but then we actually use Return of Judgment to have Brad, that trigger, target Brad, killing him and drawing us a card. But Brad has Imperishable, so that doesn't matter. Brad also is able to Judgment multiple times a turn. So we can now use that 3 will from Dinner Time to flip Brad over 3 times, have him kill himself 3 times, and draw us 3 cards and get 3 knowledge counters. So we spent 0 will here in the fact that we just use Liberation in our main phase, and then now because of the extra will coin that's generated for Dinner Time that generates us 3 will, we just drew 3 cards and got 3 knowledge counters, setting ourselves up for Mysteries of Grus Ballesta to suddenly be a much more powerful card. Suddenly number 13 is most certainly free, and we just get to kind of control the board state from there and be up on value. We do see Tyler flash in a Rogue Spectator here in response to one of the judgments. It's an interesting decision, mainly just to put a body on board. I'm not entirely sure what that's for. We're going to go ahead and just continue to cycle with Return of Judgment, continue to destroy itself, draw a bunch of cards. And then because we have Liberation of Wind in the graveyard, we use that 3 will from Dinner Time, which is fine, but then we can use Liberation for 1 more additional will, have it flip, and then destroy the Rogue Spectator and get us another knowledge counter. We should only be at 4, not 5. That's an error on my part, but we're almost certainly at 10. And now we only have to pay 1, and we can play Brad and Ki Lua, set ourselves up for this insane huge value draw engine, and just push in for lethal in the coming turns. Still leaving 4 will up. We still have Divine Lightning available. Like, this is just Brad taking center stage and going to try to beat Ki Lua to death here. We go for a Grand Leon to burn us for 6, take us down to 22. Wondering what the follow-up is here. We do see down comes the Electra. To tap out for the Electra, though, well, we do have coin still. So we do have to threaten this hand. Seeing exactly how we're going to respond to it, we're going to go ahead and use Ki Lua Fossil Girl in the City just to stop her enter effect and acknowledge the fact that she is going to be able to swing. We're just not going to take this big burn. But the swing doesn't really matter because we can just throw Brad under the bus here. He is imperishable. He's kind of this permanent blocker, at which point in time next turn we'll be able to pay 1, generate another card, generate another knowledge counter, pop the Electra, and kind of go in for aggression from there. Gonna see a swing in, gonna see a block with the Brad. And then at the end of the turn we're gonna add another knowledge counter and draw a card, or attempt to anyway. Draw for a turn. Before recovery, going to remove an ice counter and double the attack and defense of our Ki Lua, which also draws us a card. You can see just how much card draw this deck gets once it gets the Brad engine online, and how much Brad and Ki Lua just provide so much more value to this deck. We are certainly at Seal 10, so King's Hopeless Green becomes free because it's our first copy of it for the turn. We add a -6, we draw 2 more cards, and we get to rip a card out of that hand. We're certainly going to hit the Gas because the Ray Asnable is just not a threat right now, and I don't want sudden burst damage to kind of come out of nowhere. We're going to swing in for 18. At that point in time, we're going to Judgment the Brad. Or call Stone with the Brad first, why not? Because it can perform Judgment while it's rested. Flip him over, use Return of Judgment to pop the Electra, draw another card, keep our hand nice and full, and then at that point in time, follow it up with even a second Brad and Ki Lua Resonator. Most likely, as you see, it's in the hand there. Double Divine Lightning, so we can stop any kind of contracting nonsense that comes down, even though there's no contract in hand. Just a pretty much locked out board state at this point in time. That's going to be pretty, like, the top deck is going to have to be pretty gross. There is a Shiva in the opener that's available to be able to try to pop some of this stuff, which is very true, especially because it would add a lot of counters to the Shiva, actually, because the Brad and Ki Luas would have to destroy themselves, or would be destroyed by the Shiva. See a Fossil Girl just to try to draw in. So pretty good top deck, turning one card into two. Seeing a double conflict, though, is not what we wanted to see there off the top against a deck that has just a full grip of stuff in hand. Although we don't have Child of the Wind Moon anymore, so one of the conflicts is probably going to resolve. It's just a matter of what else comes down here. Looks like we do see a Ray Asnable, but this is also pretty helpful potentially to be able to protect the Fossil Girl enter effect, or the Replicant Shiva enter effect from something like a Lorite. It's going to only be able to target the Brad and Ki Luas, but that's fine because everything will then gain 6 +1/+1 counters, and then the Replicant Shiva can then kill the Brad, although you probably wouldn't want to. So we are just going to go ahead and have the sort of progression here to try to answer. And then we move in. Doesn't even try to burn the conflicts there. Oh, I think, oh, no, Tyler said, wait, I do have these conflicts in hand. Let's fight over it. Conflict of Memory to try to stop the sort of progression. And then we're going to see exactly how this is going to respond. We're going to respond to this with using Divine Lightning, targeting the Child of the Wind Moon. So we're trying to use Divine Lightning to turn off the Child of the Wind Moon. Therefore, then we can use our conflict in our hand to stop his conflict, thus being able to resolve things. So with the Child of the Wind Moon not being able to cancel a free spell because the God's Art's gone, we get to resolve that sequence. We're going to add knowledge counters at the end of his turn to draw a card. We're going to go to our turn. We're going to add an ice counter, or remove an ice counter to double the attack and defense, draw another card. Like, Tyler has 0 cards in hand at this point. He has a Ray Asnable, he's at 2200 life. I have 3 attackers, two of which can become 1800. So like, that is the game, just a matter of walking it out. So hope you guys enjoyed this match. We'll have deck profiles for both versions of Ki Lua up later this week, or Ki Lua and Brad's list later this week. But let me know how you guys have been trying to play these new Duo Resonators, or if you've done something different with Ki Lua in the coming weeks. And until next time, this is TMO73 saying class dismissed.